No one noticed the girl at first. In the savannah, people learn quickly to scan for movement that is large, fast, and dangerous. A child, small and still, disappears into the landscape. She lay near a cluster of low shrubs, dust clinging to her clothes, her breathing shallow and uneven. Her legs were scraped raw, her lips cracked from thirst. She had been crying for hours before the sound finally left her throat. By the time the safari convoy reached the bend in the dirt road, she no longer had the strength to call out. The first sign that something was wrong was the guide's sudden stop. He raised his hand sharply, signaling silence. The engine idled, then cut. The air filled with the sound of insects and distant wind. Everyone followed his gaze. A lion stood in the open, not pacing, not stalking, standing still, as if carved from the land itself. A full-grown male, mane heavy and dark, eyes fixed forward. For a split second, panic rippled through the vehicle. Hands tightened around seatbelts. Someone whispered a curse. Cameras froze mid-air. Then they saw the girl. She was on the lion's back. Her arms were wrapped loosely around his neck, her cheek pressed into his mane. Her body moved with the slow rise and fall of his breathing. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't struggling. She looked asleep or unconscious. The lion took a slow step forward, muscles rolling beneath his skin. The girl shifting slightly with the motion but never slipping. His tail swayed calmly behind him. No one spoke. The guide's mouth went dry. Years of training, of rules drilled into his mind, offered no explanation for what he was seeing. Lions did not carry children. Lions did not tolerate weight on their backs. Lions did not walk calmly toward vehicles with prey still alive and unharmed. The lion stopped again, no more than 20 meters away. The girl stirred. Her fingers twitched in the mane. Her head lifted weakly, eyes fluttering open just enough to reveal confusion, not fear. She made a small sound, barely audible, and tightened her grip instinctively. The lion did not react. He adjusted his stance slightly, lowering his body just enough to make her more secure. Someone in the back seat began to cry. The guide raised one hand again, lower this time, urging everyone to stay still. Any sudden movement could shatter the fragile balance holding this moment together. The lion's gaze never left them. There was no aggression in his eyes, no hunger. There was focus, purpose. The girl's legs hung limp against his sides. One foot was bare, the sole torn and bleeding. She had been walking, alone, for far too long. The guide felt a sickness settle in his chest as the reality sank in. This child had wandered into the savannah and survived long enough to encounter the one animal that should have ended her life instantly. Instead, the lion had picked her up. The lion took another step closer. The girl whimpered softly and shifted again, her body sagging with exhaustion. The lion responded immediately, lowering his head and slowing his pace, as if aware that even the smallest jolt might hurt her. He stopped once more, close enough now that the guide could see the dust caught in the girl's eyelashes, the shallow flutter of her chest. The guide's hands trembled as he reached for the radio and then stopped. He didn't know what to say. There was no protocol for this, no manual that explained what to do when a predator behaved like a guardian. The lion turned his body slightly, angling himself so the girl faced the vehicle more clearly. It was not accidental. It was deliberate. As if he were presenting her, as if he were bringing her back. And in that instant the guide understood something that made his throat tighten. The lion was not hunting. He was returning her. The guide lowered his hand inch by inch, afraid that even the smallest command might fracture what was happening in front of them. The lion stood motionless, the girl still draped across his back, her breathing shallow but steady. Heat shimmered between them, distorting the air. The savannah felt smaller now, compressed into the narrow space between instinct and disbelief. Someone in the vehicle whispered that they should back away. Another murmured that they should call for help immediately. The guide heard none of it. His eyes were locked on the lion's shoulders, on the way the animal subtly adjusted his stance every time the girl shifted. It was the same movement he had seen mothers make with cubs too young to hold on. Protective, automatic. The girl stirred again, this time more awake. Her fingers clenched in the mane, then loosened. Her head rolled slightly, and she murmured a single word, broken and dry. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even a plea. It was a name. The guide felt his chest tighten. She was calling for someone who wasn't there. The lion responded before anyone else could. He lowered his body slowly, bending his front legs first, then easing his massive weight down until his chest touched the ground. He moved with exaggerated care, as if aware that one wrong motion could send her tumbling. When he was low enough, he tilted his shoulder just slightly, allowing the girl to slide down into the grass, still supported by his flank. She collapsed against him. The girl did not try to stand. Her legs failed her completely. She slumped forward, cheek pressed into the lion's side, her small body curling inward from exhaustion. The lion remained still, a wall of muscle and warmth beside her. His head lowered until his chin rested in the dirt inches from her hand. The guide's breath caught. This was no longer just strange. It was intimate. The girl's chest fluttered rapidly now, her breaths shallow and uneven. Dehydration. Shock. The guide had seen it before in adults. In children, it was worse. He opened the door slowly, every muscle screaming against the decision. The click of the latch sounded impossibly loud. The lion's ears flicked once, sharply, but he did not rise. His eyes never left the guide. The guide stepped out. He did not approach the girl, he did not raise his hands, he did not speak. He stood beside the vehicle, visible, grounded, letting the lion decide whether this intrusion would be tolerated. Seconds passed. The Savanna held its breath. The lion exhaled, a deep, controlled breath that rippled through his chest and mane. He did not move away from the girl. He did not bare his teeth. He simply watched. The guide took one slow step forward, then stopped. The girl whimpered faintly, her fingers twitching in the grass. The lion responded instantly, shifting his body so she was more fully shielded from the sun. His shadow fell across her face. The guide felt tears sting his eyes without warning. He turned his face away for a moment, ashamed of the weakness, then forced himself back. He knelt at a distance, careful not to cross an invisible boundary he could feel, but not see. He spoke softly now, not to the lion but to the girl. He told her his name. He told her she was safe. He told her help was coming, even though he wasn't sure how that help would arrive. The girl's eyes opened again, unfocused, searching. They landed on the guide for a brief second, then drifted back to the lion. Her hand moved, slow and trembling, until her fingers brushed the thick fur beside her. She relaxed slightly at the contact, as if reassured by the presence she already trusted. That was when the guide understood. This lion had not simply found her, he had stayed with her. Somewhere out there, in the vastness of the Savanna, the girl had fallen. She had cried, she had waited, and when something enormous and deadly emerged from the grass, it had not ended her life. It had lifted her onto its back and carried her away from danger, toward the only moving thing on the horizon. Toward people. The lion lifted his head suddenly, eyes shifting past the guide. His muscles tensed not in aggression but in alert. The guide followed his gaze and felt his stomach drop. In the distance, shapes were moving. Other lions, and they were coming closer. The guide's pulse spiked as the shapes in the distance resolved into bodies. 3 lionesses moving low through the grass, their heads aligned, their pace unhurried but deliberate. They were not rushing, they were assessing. The wind shifted and carried the scent of the girl, the vehicle, the humans kneeling in the open. The male lifted himself halfway, placing his body between the girl and the approaching females. His mane bristled. A low sound rolled out of his chest, not loud enough to be a roar but heavy enough to change the air. The lionesses slowed. One flicked her tail, irritation flashing through her posture. This was not how it was supposed to go. Inside the vehicle, someone whispered a prayer. Another person raised a camera and then lowered it, hands shaking. The guide stayed kneeling, frozen in a posture that felt both respectful and absurd, eyes darting between the male and the approaching pride. He knew this moment could break either way. The male was dominant, yes, but the Savanna did not belong to one animal alone. Hunger, instinct, hierarchy, any of them could tip the balance. The girl coughed weakly and shifted against the male's flank. Her movement drew the lioness's attention instantly. One stepped forward, ears flattening, eyes narrowing. The male turned his head sharply and released a deeper call, louder now, edged with authority. It was not an invitation. It was a command. The lioness stopped mid-step. The others halted as well, muscles coiled, tails lashing the grass. The guide felt his breath leave him in a rush. He had never seen lions argue like this without violence. It was a standoff built on sound and posture, on a language older than anything he had studied. The male lowered himself again, deliberately, returning to a position beside the girl. He placed his body close enough that she was almost tucked beneath his chest, shielded from every direction. He licked her hair once, a rough, careful swipe that left dust and warmth behind. The girl sighed, a small, broken sound, and relaxed into the grass. The guide's eyes burned. He looked away, wiped his face with the back of his hand, then forced himself to focus. He reached slowly into his pack and drew out a bottle of water and a cloth. He set them on the ground between himself and the lion, not pushing them forward, just letting them exist. The male watched the movement closely, eyes tracking the guide's hands. The guide froze again, then withdrew his hands and waited. The cloth lay untouched. The water caught the light. The savanna hummed. Minutes stretched. The lionesses shifted their weight, uncertain, restless. One paced a short arc, then stopped. Another sat back on her haunches, ears flicking toward the horizon. The sound of engines reached them faintly now, far off but unmistakable. Rescue vehicles. The guide felt hope flare and then immediately tamped it down. Hope could get people killed here if it turned into haste. The male heard the engines too. His head lifted. His gaze flicked from the horizon to the guide, then back again. He rose once more, tall and imposing, and took 2 slow steps toward the lionesses, blocking their line. He did not charge. He did not bare his teeth. He simply existed in their space with a certainty that forced a decision. The lionesses hesitated. One turned her head away first, another followed. The third lingered, eyes fixed on the girl for a heartbeat longer, then stepped back as well. They did not leave. They settled. The guide swallowed hard. This was worse in some ways. A waiting pride meant time was thin. He glanced toward the distant dust plume of the approaching convoy, then back to the girl. Her breathing had grown more erratic. Her lips were pale. He knew shock when he saw it. He also knew that waiting too long could steal her from them quietly. The male turned again and did something that made the guide's heart lurch. He nudged the cloth with his nose and pushed it a few inches closer to the girl. The movement was small, almost dismissible, but it felt intentional. The guide did not question it. He slid forward on his knees just enough to reach the cloth, dipped it in the water, and wrung it out with shaking hands. He kept his eyes low. He moved slowly. He extended the cloth toward the girl, stopping short, letting the male decide. The lion did not strike. He shifted his body slightly, creating space. The guide pressed the cool cloth gently against the girl's forehead. She gasped softly and leaned into it, eyes fluttering open for a second. The guide murmured reassurance, words spilling out, because silence felt unbearable. The male watched every motion, close enough that the guide could see the scar along his shoulder, the old mark of a fight survived. The engines grew louder now, closer than before. The lionesses rose to their feet again, tension returning like a tide. The male lifted his head, mane lifting in the breeze. The guide felt the moment narrowing, choices collapsing into a single path. They were about to arrive, and when they did, everything that had held so delicately could shatter. The guide looked at the girl, at the lion standing guard, and understood with a sudden clarity that made his chest ache. If they moved too fast now, they would lose her, and if they waited too long, they would lose her anyway. He raised his hand slowly toward the approaching dust and prayed the people coming would understand what he could barely explain. The first rescue vehicle crested the rise and slowed instantly. The guide's raised hand remained frozen in the air, a silent plea. Engines dropped to a low rumble. Doors stayed shut. No one shouted. No one ran. The convoy stopped at a careful distance, dust settling around the tires, as if the land itself were urging restraint. Through the windshields, Faces stared in disbelief at the scene unfolding in the open. The male lion stood tall, body squared, mane lifting slightly in the breeze. The girl lay at his feet, curled against his shadow, the cloth still resting on her forehead. The lionesses watched from their positions, alert but still. The savannah had become a suspended space where every sound felt dangerous. The guide moved first, slowly lowering himself even further, signaling the rescuers to do the same. A medic slid from one of the vehicles, staying low, eyes fixed on the lion, every step measured. The male's ears twitched, his muscles tightened, but he did not advance. He did not retreat. He simply watched. The medic stopped, waited. Seconds stretched. Then the male lion did something that broke the tension like a breath finally released. He stepped away from the girl. One step, then another. Not far. Just enough to create space. He turned his head back toward her, eyes never leaving her face, then sat down heavily in the grass. It was permission. The guide felt his throat close. Tears blurred his vision as he nodded sharply to the medic. Together, they moved forward, slow and deliberate, hands visible, movements small. They reached the girl and lifted her gently, her body frighteningly light in their arms. She whimpered once, weakly, and her hand lifted as if searching for something familiar. The male lion rose immediately. Every heart stopped, but he did not charge. He took 2 slow steps forward, then stopped again, close enough that the guide could see the amber in his eyes, the flecks of dust in his mane. The girl's fingers brushed the air, then fell back against the medic's shoulder. The lion lowered his head and exhaled deeply, a long sound that vibrated through his chest and into the ground beneath them. The guide understood then. This was goodbye. They carried the girl to the vehicle and laid her inside, shade falling over her face for the first time in hours. Fluids were administered. Cool air brushed her skin. Her breathing steadied, just enough to keep hope alive. As the doors closed, the guide turned back. The lion was already walking away. The lionesses fell in beside him one by one, their bodies melting into the tall grass. None of them looked back. Within moments, the savannah erased them completely, leaving only flattened grass and silence behind. The convoy moved out carefully, slowly, as if afraid to disturb what had just occurred. Hours later, at the nearest medical station, the girl woke briefly. She did not cry. She did not panic. She whispered a single word before drifting back to sleep. No one understood it at first. The guide did. Lion. The investigation that followed asked many questions. How far had she walked? How long had she been alone? Why had no one noticed her missing sooner? Those answers came later, heavy and painful, but they were not the ones that stayed. What stayed was the image no training could explain, a predator carrying a child not as prey but as responsibility, a guide who had seen death 100 times, kneeling in the dirt with tears streaming down his face because something ancient and merciful had chosen a different ending. The girl recovered, slowly. Fully. She would never remember every detail, but she would remember warmth, movement, and the strange certainty that she had not been alone when it mattered most. The guide returned to the savannah many times after that. He never saw that lion again. But sometimes in the early mornings, when the light turned the grass gold and the land felt impossibly still, he would pause and listen. And in that silence, he would remember the day the savannah chose compassion over instinct. The day a lion carried a child home.